2020. Police and FBI descended on Chad Daybell's property in Salem, Idaho, armed with a search warrant for evidence in the case of Tylee Ryan and JJ Vallow, the missing children of Daybell's second wife, Lori Vallow. The Daybell home sits on a corner lot in a farming community north of Rexburg. Stretching east about 4 acres, the property consists of the family home, 2 sheds and a red barn. Just feet from this busy road is Chad Daybell's backyard. Searchers focused on this area beyond the red barn, digging in the dirt under blue tarps for 2 days. It's an area in clear view from this road. According to a probable cause affidavit, authorities homed in on multiple sites of interest. Police say these places matched the cell phone location of Lori Vallow's brother, Alex Cox, in September 2019. The same month, the children disappeared. The first site was an area on the north edge of the property. That corresponded with 2 GPS pings from Cox's phone on September 23rd. The area measured about 4 feet by 2.5, with a patch of weed growth shorter than the surrounding area, suggesting it was recently disturbed. Authorities used a backhoe excavator to pull back the top layer of sod, revealing a body wrapped in plastic and duct tape beneath several large flat rocks and pieces of flat paneling. The on-site anthropologist confirmed it to be human remains. We now know to be JJ Vallow. Chad Daybell was arrested around 11 a.m. as the search continued for 16-year-old Tylee Ryan. Authorities then turned their attention to this area between the red barn and a fire pit. An area we know now is the Daybell Pet Cemetery. The site correlated to several GPS pings of Alex Cox's phone on September 9th, 2019. Authorities methodically sifted through layers of dirt in this area. They found pieces of bones and human tissue, some of which were burned. Authorities then focused on the Daybell fire pit, where neighbors reported seeing bonfires in the fall of 2019. And police point to a text message Chad Daybell sent to his wife on September 9th, the day after Tylee was last seen alive. In the text, Chad said he was burning tree limbs after shooting and burying a raccoon in the pet cemetery. Authorities have not revealed what exactly they uncovered in the fire pit area, but we know now Tylee's remains were found on the property too.
So 3 areas of extreme interest in that backyard. You see they're sort of spread out a little bit. Let's bring in everyone. Chanley Painter, Ashley Banfield, Julie Grant, Ted Rowlands, all here. Chanley, first, looking at how far down they went, it's sort of difficult to tell, but it doesn't look like they went super deep to recover these remains.
No, for the site of interest of JJ Vallow was only about 2.5 feet under the ground when they recovered his remains, wrapped tightly in the plastic bags and duct tape. And then for Tylee, her remains, it was a little more difficult of a dig site. According to the probable cause affidavit, they had to really methodically sift through all of the dirt there to find pieces of her remains, some charred and uncharred, but again, only about a foot under the ground. In the affidavit, they say about a foot under the ground. They see the bricks right there in the photo that we see the bricks about a foot under. You can see someone taking a photo of the ground where that's likely the remains. I spoke to Joseph Morgan, a forensic professor at a university, and he advised that that sifting right there probably took a while and it separated in different parts of that plot. So that was definitely a more complex area for Tylee's remains as opposed to JJ's.
Ashley, as I look at this entire scene, the thing that really sticks out is the pet cemetery part. You know, it's a shocking part of all of this, but to me, he's telling Tammy about the pet cemetery. I had to take care of the raccoon. I mean, and now we know that Tylee's remains were found there, and what form they're in and exactly isn't super clear yet, but we know the area is the pet cemetery.
Well, funny you should say that, because I have that text right here. And when he refers to the pet cemetery, it's that square right there on the upper right-hand corner of that image. Chad says to his then alive wife, Tammy, "Well, I've had an interesting morning. I felt we should burn all of the limb debris by the fire pit before it got too soaked by the coming storms. While I did so, I spotted a big raccoon along the fence, and I hurried and got my gun, and he was still walking along. I got close enough that one shot did the trick. He's now in our pet cemetery. Fun times." That's how Chad decided to alert his wife that she might see some action around the cemetery. She might actually see some disturbed earth and might wonder why there were fires burning throughout the morning. But Chanley just hit the nail on the head, Vinny, about what Joseph Scott Morgan said. And we talked to him as well last week when we knew nothing about this. We knew nothing about what the probable cause affidavit told us. We were guessing. We were guessing that there was a fire pit nearby, and that the forensics investigators were all over that fire pit, and that whole explanation of egregiously concealed remains probably meant fire. But I think Joe Morgan was spot on. It's hard to burn a body. It takes 16 hours plus with a constant fuel source, and most terrible criminals don't know that, and they get impatient and frustrated and give up, and then they just dump the whole half-burned lot underground. Happened before, and it appears that it happened again.
Julie Grant, you know the world we live in now, and I'm looking ahead to when and if this case is ever in front of a jury. The CSI effect, talk about it all the time. You've got forensics, you've got recovery, but we don't know exactly what they're going to be able, what story these remains are going to be able to tell. And I'm afraid that they may not tell enough of a story because they're buried in the yard, because it's months and months and months until they're recovered.
That's a great point, Vinny, and I think that's something prosecutors need to be really cognizant of when and if the day comes where they need to present this case in front of a jury. You're right. In teaching legal advocacy, it's something that we teach. The side that tells the better story is the side that generally wins the case. Now, I'm putting that simply, but as you mentioned, yes, there is something called the CSI effect. Take a minute, look it up. It's really fascinating. It's a scholarly concept. There's lots of scholarly research and articles written about it that essentially says because folks love true crime shows and movies, they come to expect forensic evidence when they get to a real life trial. And oftentimes you don't need it. And practically speaking, it's very, very expensive to do all sorts of things. But in this case, I do think that they are going to get their fair share of forensic evidence. These investigators are certainly taking their time, being very careful, processing the scene, gathering the evidence. And yes, prosecutors have to tell a very compelling story, something along the lines of these kids were not wanted, and the religion was used as a guise to commit the crime of homicide, something along those lines, and bringing in the religious concepts from Mr. Doomsday and Cult Mom and all their sick, twisted beliefs to the deaths of these beautiful children who had their whole lives ahead of them, Vinny.
Ted, which do you think is a more powerful concept inside the courtroom? The fact that the defense is going to be saying they can't tell you how or exactly when or exactly how these children died, versus the prosecutor can say 2 children were discarded in a backyard. One was burnt and spread out in a pet cemetery. Another one was wrapped up and duct taped and buried in the yard. Which do you think pushes a jury more inside a courtroom?
Oh, it's the narrative. It's the story. Check Scott Peterson. They don't know how he did it, where he did it, and exactly when he did it. But who else would have done it, right? And that is what's going to transpire here, especially with Chad Daybell, because with that text that he sends his wife, he's there. He's there when Alex Cox is there. Lori Daybell, a little bit more difficult, but she's the mom of these children. And believe me, she wouldn't be prancing around with him in Hawaii if she didn't know what happened to her children. And I think the narrative is so strong here. It's disgusting. And any juror who learns this story is going to seethe with anger against those defendants. They're not going to need the physical evidence because it'll be explainable why it's not there. Alex Cox is dead.
Yeah, and you know that's the concept I called not giving a defendant the benefit of the doubt versus talking about reasonable doubt. Chanley, will there be any answers from the autopsies?
There will be, but we're going to have to wait a few more weeks. In fact, the coroner released a statement today updating everyone on the status of the autopsy results. The autopsy are complete, but there's additional testing underway for the remains of Tylee and Joshua, saying that outside and ancillary testing has been ordered and will take several weeks to return. Once all results are received, the forensic pathologist reports will be provided back to the Fremont County coroner. So what we know is that the coroner's office in Ada County, that's where the pathologist was, that's in Boise, Idaho. So that was several hours away from Fremont County. So once that testing is complete, then we will likely know what they can determine, if they can tell us the cause or the manner of death and how they came to be buried there in the backyard.
You know, Ashley, the other part of this is the investigation is continuing, right? And there's testing being, I just hate, we're talking about two children. And they have not had any sense of a respectful, proper burial. And I'm wondering when that's going to happen, where that's going to happen, and how that's going to happen.
That's a hard one, right? Because both of these children don't have dads. Both of their dads were married to Lori, and both of them are dead. And mom is in jail. I don't see that changing anytime soon. Stepdad now, Chad, is in jail. I don't see that changing. They have grandparents. You know, Larry and Kay Woodcock would bend over backwards to ensure that they had a memorial. They have been completely distraught over all of this. And Lori Vallow has a mother, and as some other children as well, who are none too pleased about the situation now, but certainly side with the children. So there are still family members left to memorialize them. When their remains are released is anybody's guess, because as I've spoken with the detectives in this case, they say we're not rushing this one, not with a Casey Anthony kind of case, you know, left, with the verdict that we saw in Florida. We're not going to see that happen here. We're going to make every single effort to have every duck in a row before we go ahead with the case. But mark my words, they say we're doing it.